summer afternoon in Staffordshire, 1931. The Prince of Wales arrives at a country house called Biddulph Grange. He is the most famous man in England, possibly the most famous man in the world. He has attended hundreds of these visits, thousands of these rooms, an entire life of precisely calibrated arrivals and departures. When he leaves, according to those who were there, he is crying. That detail stopped me when I first came across this story. Not because a prince was seen weeping. History is full of powerful men undone by grief in private. But because of what had just happened in that house, and because of what would happen in the world 18 years later as a direct consequence of this single afternoon. The woman he was mourning was named Lady Rosemary Sutherland Leveson-Gower. Most people have never heard of her. She does not appear in the standard histories of the era. She has no statue, no commemorative plaque, no chapter in the biographies of the man who wept when she died. And yet, remove her from the story, and the Prince of Wales almost certainly never becomes the Duke of Windsor. The abdication crisis of 1936, the constitutional earthquake that shook the British monarchy to its foundations, may never happen at all. This is not a story about a forgotten woman. It is a forensic investigation into a hinge point in history. The death is not the real story. The timing of it is. Before we continue, a quick word. This channel exists for one reason: to find the stories that the official record left behind. The human cost underneath the legend. If that's what you came here for, you're in the right place. We're aiming to hit 1,000 subscribers before the month ends. Subscribe and help us reach 1,000. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me what stayed with you. I genuinely read every single comment, and it shapes what we build next. Chapter 1: The Bloodline and the Rot. The family Rosemary was born into did not arrive at its position quietly. The Sutherland Leveson-Gowers were one of the wealthiest aristocratic families in Britain, a name attached to estates so vast that the scale of them resists easy comprehension. The Sutherland estate in the Scottish Highlands covered nearly 1 million acres at its peak. It was, by some measurements, the largest landholding of any private family in the Western world. The money and the land were real, so was what had paid for them. In certain parts of Scotland, the name Sutherland was not spoken with admiration. It was spoken with the precise, compressed fury of communities who had not forgotten the Highland clearances, one of the most systematic episodes of forced displacement in British history, in which tenant farmers were driven from ancestral lands across the Northern Highlands to make room for more profitable sheep farming. The Sutherland family had been among the primary architects of that displacement. Villages emptied. Families crossed oceans they had not planned to cross. The wealth Rosemary was born into did not arrive quietly. It arrived through displacement. That is a fact, and it is the ground on which everything else in this story stands. Rosemary herself was born in 1893, the daughter of the 4th Duke of Sutherland, into a world of calibrated grandeur. Country houses, London seasons, the elaborate social machinery of Edwardian aristocracy. She was by every visible measure a product of her class and her era. Beautiful in the formal sense that portraits of the period capture well. Composed in the way that girls of her background were trained to be composed from an age when composure could still reasonably be called performance. She would have been expected to marry well, produce children, manage a household of considerable scale, and move through the upper strata of British society with the practiced ease of someone who had never had a reason to question her place in it. That was the script. What actually happened to Rosemary was something else. Something more turbulent, more heartbreaking, and ultimately more consequential than the script anticipated. Death came early in this family. It was a pattern that would hold. But before the end, there was a beginning that contained something genuinely rare. A love story between two people who understood each other across the vast, supervised distance of their respective positions, and a family that looked at that love and decided it was the wrong kind. Chapter 2: The Anomaly. Before Rosemary, there was her aunt. Lady Millicent Sutherland, Rosemary's aunt by family connection, was the kind of woman who makes historians stop and recalibrate. In the formal photographs of the early 1900s, she looks like someone who has never been uncomfortable in her life. The gown is correct. The posture is correct. The expression conveys the precise combination of beauty and authority that her position required. Within a decade, she would be operating a nursing unit in German-occupied Belgium, moving through besieged territory, organizing the evacuation of wounded soldiers from positions that professional military men considered unreachable. She was not trained for it. She was not expected to do it. She simply looked at what was in front of her and decided she was going to be useful. That quality, the capacity to step cleanly out of the script and function in conditions the script had never imagined, ran in the family. Rosemary had it too. It expressed itself differently, more quietly, but it was there. Rosemary came of age during the First World War in the way that most women of her background and generation did. Through nursing, through charitable work, through the particular kind of proximity to suffering that the war forced on everyone regardless of class. The hospitals and convalescent homes that received the wounded from the Western Front were staffed significantly by women who had been raised entirely for drawing rooms and now found themselves doing something real, something that required them, something that left a mark. It was in this context, not a ballroom, not a country house weekend, not a carefully arranged introduction, that Rosemary and the Prince of Wales first became properly acquainted. They were both, in different ways, people who had grown up performing a role and who had found, in the disruption of the war years, a version of themselves that the performance had not accommodated. They recognized something in each other. That recognition was the beginning of everything. Chapter 3, The Collision. The Prince of Wales, Edward, known to his family as David, was not, during the war years, the figure the public mythology would later construct. He was frustrated. Deeply, visibly frustrated. He had campaigned repeatedly for permission to serve on the front lines. The requests were denied with the same institutional logic each time. He was the heir to the throne. His capture or death would be catastrophic. He could not be risked. He spent 3 years feeling useless while other men his age were dying in conditions he was forbidden from sharing. He was drawn intensely and consistently to people who were not performing their positions. People who were simply functioning in reality, doing what needed doing, without the self-consciousness that his own situation forced on nearly every interaction. Rosemary Sutherland Leveson-Gower was precisely that kind of person. She was not awed by his title. She was, by all accounts, warm, direct, and genuinely unconcerned with the elaborate status management that defined most interactions in their shared social world. She talked to him the way people talk to someone they actually find interesting, which was not, in his experience, common. The friendship deepened. By the early 1920s, it had become something beyond friendship, a bond that those around them recognized as singular, as the kind of attachment that Edward did not form easily or often. He wanted to marry her. The evidence suggests this was not casual sentiment, but a sustained, serious intention. And then his father intervened. King George V looked at the Sutherland family and performed the calculation that British monarchs have always performed when evaluating prospective additions to the bloodline. He looked at the financial condition of the family. The Sutherland fortune had declined significantly from its Victorian peak. He looked at the family history. He looked at the specific features of the match. What he saw was not a woman. He saw a risk assessment, and the assessment came back unfavorable. The answer was no. Chapter 4. The Veto and the Butterfly Effect. The king's refusal was not delivered with drama. It did not need to be. In the constitutional world of the British monarchy in the 1920s, a father's veto over his heir's marriage was not a suggestion. It was architecture, the load-bearing wall of an entire system of dynastic management that had been refined across centuries of practice. Edward could not override it. He was not built at that point to override it, so he did not marry Rosemary. And that single fact, that specific, contained, private refusal in the early 1920s, set in motion a chain of events whose consequences would not fully arrive for another 15 years, but would, when they did, shake the British Constitution to its foundations. The logic runs directly. Edward, denied the marriage he wanted, did not settle into the expected pattern of a dynastic match with a suitable European princess. He drifted. He had relationships, notable, complicated, conducted with a disregard for discretion that alarmed the palace with increasing frequency. He was looking, in the analysis of those who observed him closely, for whatever it was that Rosemary had represented. Someone who was real, someone who saw him rather than the title, someone who did not require him to perform. He found it, eventually, in Wallis Simpson. Wallis Simpson was twice divorced, American, and so categorically unsuitable by the standards of the institution that the match required the most extraordinary constitutional resolution in the history of the modern monarchy. Edward chose her over the throne. In December 1936, he abdicated. The ripple effects of that abdication shaped the 20th century in ways that are still being calculated. The crowning of his brother George VI, the steady center that brother provided during the Second World War, the entire trajectory of the monarchy that followed. None of it was inevitable. All of it traces back, if you follow the chain carefully enough, to a refusal in the early 1920s. To a king who looked at a family and performed a risk assessment. To a young woman who had done nothing wrong and was found, by the cold logic of dynasties, to be the wrong kind. The heartbreak was local. The consequences were global. Chapter 5, The False Peace. Rosemary moved on. People do. She married in 1919, William Ward, the 3rd Earl of Dudley, a match that was by the standards of her world entirely appropriate and by most accounts genuinely affectionate. She had children. She managed an estate. She built the life that had been outlined for her before any of the other events had intervened, and she built it with the composure that her background had prepared her to maintain. There is a version of this part of the story that is peaceful. The prince and his feeling had been a road not taken. The road she was on had real things on it: a husband, children, a house with rooms full of evidence of daily life. And then, in December 1929, her son John Jeremy Ward died in a road accident. He was 7 years old. He had been cycling. The accident was the kind that leaves no room for negotiation or preparation. Sudden, complete, without warning or logic. She lost a child. The specific devastation of that particular loss, its randomness, its totality, its complete indifference to her name or her position, was something that no estate or title or carefully maintained composure could address. She went on. Her 2 remaining sons needed her too. That is, in the end, the full explanation of how people survive these things. Not healing, not resolution, but the requirement of continued presence. She went on. But the grief had taken something permanent, and the woman who continued into the 1930s carried it in the way that people who have lost children always carry it. As a weight that doesn't announce itself, but is always present, redistributing itself through every ordinary day. Chapter 6, The Climax and Payoff. On the 31st of July, 1930, Rosemary boarded an aircraft in France. She was returning to England. The Channel crossing was routine, the kind of journey that people of her position and her era made with the casual frequency that marked their relationship to travel. The aircraft was a standard passenger flight of the period. At approximately 2:35 in the afternoon, the aircraft encountered conditions over the English coast that it could not manage. It came down near the village of Sandhurst in Kent. The official account is clinical, as official accounts tend to be. Mechanical failure. Fatal injuries sustained on impact. The passengers and crew did not survive. What the clinical language cannot fully contain is this. Among the wreckage in that Kent orchard, Rosemary Sutherland Leveson-Gower was found identified, in the accounts that came down through the family and the period records, by her pearls. Not by her face. Not by her papers. By her pearls. She was 37 years old. She had been born into one of the wealthiest families in Britain. She had been loved by the heir to the British throne. She had survived the First World War, the loss of a son, and the various accumulated griefs of a life lived at a level of visibility that offered no protection against any of it. And she lay in an orchard in Kent, recognized by her jewelry, while the Prince of Wales, who was at that moment somewhere in England, continuing his restless, searching life, still looking for the thing he had been denied a decade earlier, was informed that she was gone. He went to Biddulph Grange that summer. And when he left, he was crying. We are back where we started. Now you know why. Chapter 7, The Aftermath and Echo. Edward abdicated in December 1936. Of all the houses in England available to him for his final night as king, he chose to spend it at Fort Belvedere. But the gravitational pull of Rosemary's story clung to the periphery of his, documented in letters and in the accounts of those closest to him, for the rest of his long, exiled life. He lived until 1972. He had decades to understand what the chain of events had been. Whether he understood it is not recorded. History did not hold on to Rosemary Sutherland Leveson-Gower. She has slipped between the footnotes, between the abdication crisis and the war years and everything else that seemed larger and louder and more obviously consequential. She was 37 years old, in an orchard in Kent, recognized by her pearls. I went looking. This is what I found. These are the stories the history books forgot. If that matters to you, subscribe, and don't miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read everyone. I want to know.